There's not a chance in hell that this is funny or gonna work. And when you see those flat, corny, late-night monologue jokes with no audience, Colbert, there's Jimmy Kimmel, there's Fallon. What they're doing is just like reading off of a teleprompter. So a bunch of really good joke writers wrote them some stuff, and then they're playing to the audience, and the audience is like laughing, so they get this feedback, and they know how to do that. They stand there, and there's applause signs. And then there's producers. There's the warm-up guy that's literally telling people to clap. They're like, okay, explaining to the people, okay, when Jimmy comes out, I want a big round of applause. Let's practice this right now.
Imagine waking up to discover Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson have joined forces, an unholy alliance of unfiltered commentary and chaos. Their first target? Jimmy Kimmel. No warning, no mercy. They tore into him with the precision of seasoned brawlers, microphones blazing. Kimmel tried to respond, but it was like bringing a kazoo to a cannon fight. What began as late-night comedy quickly turned into a tag-team takedown. Hollywood fell silent. This isn't just a feud. It's a comedic demolition derby.
How can Jimmy Kimmel live with him? Like, Jimmy Kimmel is a talented guy, and I don't think he's like an evil person or something, but he's made this deal where he just serves power and attacks anybody who challenges power. Like, how can... Honestly, how can he look in the mirror and say, I'm doing something honorable? Like, how can he live with himself? How can his wife sleep with him?
Well,
Joe Rogan is many things. Stand-up comic, jiu-jitsu junkie, mushroom sage, UFC hype man. But above all, he's a patron saint of skeptics. And when he turns his gaze toward late-night TV's most pitiful punching bag, things spiral fast. Mockery becomes mayhem in record time.
And this is why so much of comedy is not funny today. It's my chief criticism of like late night comedy, which I find unwatchable. I think it's totally unwatchable.
But also contemptible. I mean, they're collaborators.
They're just like the fact checkers. They're guardians of the narrative.
There's something oddly poetic about it. Joe Rogan, the world's most unfiltered podcast host, steamrolling Jimmy Kimmel, once a king of couch potato comedy, now a sanitized relic soft-launching therapy sessions under studio lights. Kimmel, once raw and irreverent, has traded edge for earnestness. Meanwhile, Joe's probably shirtless, laughing at elk meat and torching the sacred cows of celebrity sainthood, mic in hand, chaos in his heart. It's modern media's strangest role reversal.
Road to obscurity. Nobody's going to care anymore. It's like you're seeing it take place with late night television. Nobody gives a fuck about it anymore.
I know.
And it's slowly, you have a bad business model and you're not adapting.
Yeah, the creativity's gone for late night comedy, right? Like, that's not really a thing anymore.
So when Jimmy Kimmel climbed atop a metaphorical soapbox built from cancel culture and virtue signals, Joe Rogan didn't hesitate. He lobbed a dumbbell straight through the foundation. It wasn't a fair fight. Rogan, powered by caffeine, DMT flashbacks, and a nationwide militia of guys named Kyle building squat racks in their garages, casually called out the Emperor's new late-night clothes. It wasn't polite. It wasn't subtle. It was a full-contact takedown, the audio equivalent of taking a kettlebell to the face at point-blank range.
It'd be one thing if his job wasn't to be a comedian and to do that, but his job is to be he's supposed to be funny. And comedians are supposed to hold people in positions of power accountable.
Suck up
to
the people in charge.
Exactly.
He's their Praetorian guard.
Yeah.
And it's like the self-hatred he must feel, because he wasn't always. That's my point. Yeah. I mean, Colbert has always been a hard partisan, talented guy, but obviously he's not a comedian. But Kimmel was a comedian. Like, how does he? I don't understand.
I don't know
how he can sleep.
Joe Rogan has a deep, almost instinctual aversion to inauthenticity. He spots pre-packaged sentiment, like it's trying to scam him out of rent money. And in his eyes, modern-day Jimmy Kimmel is a final form of forced clapdoor. Once a jester, now a moralist soaking in the warm bath of applause signs and op-ed approval. Rogan didn't need to scream. He just pointed to what everyone else had been too polite to say. Somewhere along the way, Kimmel stopped being funny and started reading cue cards from a Hallmark card. For a guy like Rogan, that's comedy treason. Rogan lives in a world where the punchline is sacred. You don't sanitize it, you don't code it in virtue, and you definitely don't follow it with a teary-eyed monologue about the state of democracy. That's not stand-up, that's stand down. But Joe didn't stop with style. He questioned the entire premise of Kimmel's act, mocking everyday people 1 minute, then pretending to speak for them the next, living off Hollywood glitz while insisting he's one of the guys. Rogan tore that illusion apart with the precision of a UFC veteran dismantling a papier-mâché dummy. And across the country, Tucker Carlson adjusted his tie, smiled, and loaded the rhetorical sniper rifle. Joe brought the punches. Tucker brought the kill shots.
He might buy into the narrative to the extent that he thinks it's morally wrong to joke about these certain topics.
But it's not just that. He's like pouring hot oil on the peasants from the parapet. Right. Like he's hurting anyone who challenges the king. Right. It's crazy.
It is crazy. It's upside down. The comedians should be poking holes in the popular narrative, not propping it up.
Jimmy Kimmel is. Like, truly. No, I mean it.
You
like,
said
no
it, not me.
No amount of money is worth what he's doing, in my
Tucker Carlson doesn't roast with expletives or testosterone-fueled rants. He deals in something colder, sharper. His weapon of choice? The velvet glove gut punch. The skeptical eyebrow raise. The smirk that quietly asks, is this guy serious? So when Jimmy Kimmel waded into political commentary disguised as comedy, Tucker didn't just call him out. He performed a televised dissection. Kimmel, once the guy cracking jokes about celebrities falling over, now postures as Hollywood's moral compass. And Tucker? He wasn't buying it. In Carlson's world, there's no space for a man who built a career on punchlines and then looks offended when people expect, well, jokes. He didn't see Kimmel as a comedian anymore. He saw a failed pundit, cosplaying Jon Stewart, but with worse writers and a louder applause sign. Tucker didn't rage. He rarely does. What he delivered was passive-aggressive bewilderment, laced with surgical precision. How? His expression seemed to ask, did this guy go from mocking the Bachelor to lecturing Americans on democracy? He didn't need to yell. He just pointed out the obvious. Kimmel's evolution from lovable class clown to sanctimonious substitute teacher had become...
In that case, do you think that's him or a writer? Can't you tell?
Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah.
No, it's him, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
good. That's a good one.
He's a comic.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, he used to host The Man Show. I mean, he's done some pretty outrageous shit back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, for hee-hees and haw-haws.
No, that's a good joke on top of a good joke.
Yeah, it's a good joke. Funny thing to say. He's had a real problem with Elon from the beginning of this thing, but it's like he's in this leftist thought bubble. He is in the most leftist thought bubble available, which is Hollywood.
And that's where it turned lethal. The more seriously Jimmy Kimmel tried to present himself, the more absurd he looked through Tucker Carlson's lens, a comedian who forgot how to land a joke and instead settled for politically correct performance art. It was like watching a magician forget how to shuffle cards and start shouting at the audience. While Joe Rogan shook his head at the Hollywood echo chamber, Tucker delivered a calm, cutting lecture on the extinction of comedy. One questioned Jimmy's relevance. The other his authenticity. Together, they didn't just criticize. They turned him into a case study on what happens when funny people take themselves too seriously. And here's the kicker. They weren't even teaming up. This wasn't a coordinated takedown. It was two ideological opposites independently looking at the same man and saying, yikes! Rogan attacked from the cultural underground, all gym sweat and podcast smoke. Tucker struck from a media mountaintop, tailored suit and devastating poise. Poor Jimmy was trapped in the middle, like a possum frozen between two headlights, one ranting about elk jerky, the other calmly citing historical trends. Joe mocked the fall, how Kimmel once thrived on Raw.
Even the quote, comedians, they were on propaganda duty too. Watch this.
He's also pushing U.S. intelligence to find evidence for this theory that the virus was accidentally released from a lab in Wuhan. That's his new angle to feed the wingnuts, to treat this virus like it was a conspiracy of some kind.
It should have never happened. This plague should never have happened. It could have been stopped. But people chose not to stop it.
What people? Tomorrow he'll blame the Spanish flu on Antonio Banderas.
Yeah. Imagine if you're a comedian and all of a sudden your cue card has all kinds of talking points from politicians and foreign governments on it. Don't read it. You degrade yourself, and you become complicit in the greatest crime in...
Tucker Carlson, meanwhile, didn't just call Jimmy Kimmel unfunny. He treated him like a symptom of a deeper ideological rot. To Tucker, Kimmel isn't a comedian anymore. He's a media puppet, a mouthpiece of the coastal elite who traded satire for sermons. Clapping for the correct side of an issue, Tucker argued, isn't courage. It's cowardice dressed up in applause. And while Kimmel basked in the warm glow of studio approval, the takedown came out of nowhere. Like a Tesla in ludicrous mode, silent, fast, and smug. The fallout? Hilarious. Not because Kimmel clapped back. He didn't. He couldn't. You don't respond to Rogan's deadpan body blows or Tucker's surgical snark. You just pray the internet scrolls on. Kimmel's defenders defaulted to the usual buzzwords. He's evolved. He's brave. He's speaking truth. But when Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, two men who rarely agree on anything, both torch you in the same week, it's not a feud. It's a bipartisan spiritual audit. Joe called out the transformation. How the guy who once thrived on awkward, irreverent humor now seems allergic to discomfort. Today, every punchline comes with a disclaimer. Every monologue reads like it passed through 5 HR departments. To Rogan, real comedy punches. Up, down, sideways, but always punches. Kimmel? He just softly nudges with a pastel glove.
That sort of self-censorship and the idea of being a more empathetic person is a good thing, right? But as long as it's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, the problem with that kind of stuff is it continues to go in the same direction where more and more things become forbidden and toxic.
Meanwhile, Tucker Carlson unsheathed the academic machete. He dissected what he called the Kimmel effect as more than just a comedic failure. It was a symptom of cultural rot. Carlson saw it as the slow death of authenticity, the corporate capture of comedy, and worst of all, boredom. To Tucker, boredom is sin. And in his latest incarnation, Jimmy Kimmel had become a televangelist of tedium. Together, Rogan and Carlson didn't just roast Kimmel. They held a eulogy for the version of him that used to be tolerable, maybe even likable. The old Jimmy, the one who laughed at absurdity and punched both sides with equal glee, was gone. In his place stood a sanitized teleprompter reader, cloaked in the branded bathrobe of his former self. It would have stung less if they'd screamed, mocked, or insulted him outright, but they didn't. They simply held up mirrors. Rogan's was smudged with pre-workout powder and unfiltered honesty. Tucker's was polished steel, reflecting every contradiction with unnerving clarity. The image staring back? It wasn't pretty. This wasn't bullying. It was an intervention. And ironically, from two men who rarely agree on anything. Yet they both arrived at the same conclusion. Jimmy Kimmel had become everything he once mocked. The tragic part? Kimmel probably thinks he's winning. But in his world, the clapping never stops. Whether the joke lands, flops, or dies on arrival, it's all applause. Hollow, automatic, mandatory.
Jimmy Kimmel made a tweet back to him. He said, "Your pronouns are ass and hole," which is pretty funny. But then,
Did he really?
Yes. And so then I read that, and there was people saying, "Please don't joke about pronouns. It's transphobic to joke about pronouns." So they were chiding him for participating in a joke about pronouns.
So Jimmy Kimmel was doing it. He was doing it too.
Yeah, he was doing it too.
No, he was being accused of joking about it too.
So they were upset at him, even though he was attacking the appropriate person. He was doing it in a manner which is also construed as being transphobic.
Joe Rogan's audience doesn't clap on cue. They question, rewind, argue in the comments. They sniff out scripted theater from a mile away. Tucker Carlson's crowd? They keep receipts. They'll let you monologue yourself into a corner, then roll out a PowerPoint eulogy with timestamps. So when two of the most opinionated voices in media both decide to peel back the curtain on Jimmy Kimmel, it's not just a takedown. It's a slow public unraveling. Rogan didn't care about politics. He cared about realness. And Kimmel, in his current state, is about as real as a gluten-free chicken nugget in a vegan air fryer. Tucker didn't care about punchlines. He cared about principle. Watching Kimmel play act as America's conscience while sipping organic tea in a green room probably shattered his last neuron of tolerance. There was no comeback story, no redemption arc. Just two media juggernauts stepping into the metaphorical ring, flattening a legacy with casual precision, then walking off before the credits rolled. Kimmel wasn't canceled. He wasn't silenced. He was clowned methodically, brutally, and by the very audiences he once ridiculed. In the end, he wasn't taken down. He faded, exposed. A punchline without a...
The job description of a comedian is not so different from the job description of a journalist, as traditionally constituted. Tell the truth about the powerful. Comedians are usually a lot smarter, more clever, and incisive than journalists, but that's what they're supposed to be doing. Almost none still do. Adam Carolla is one of the very few remaining comedians in the United States.
For a comedian, there's no fate worse than becoming the punchline, and not in a clever, self-deprecating way. When no one's laughing with you anymore, only at you, that's not just career decline, it's comedic exile. And that's exactly where Jimmy Kimmel found himself. Joe Rogan probably shrugged it off and went back to talking elk meat and aliens with Navy SEAL hopped up on creatine. But the cultural tremors? They were real. Kimmel had unintentionally become the mascot for everything wrong with modern late-night TV. Overproduced, underfunny, and bloated with self-importance. Meanwhile, Rogan sat in a room that looked like a tactical sauna, casually rewriting the rules of media influence. No suit, no teleprompter, just real conversations pulling in more eyes and trust than anything network television could hope for. And it wasn't just Rogan's fans who noticed. Everyone felt the shift. Kimmel wasn't edgy anymore. He was edible, bland, easy to digest, engineered for corporate safety. Like someone stuffed Jon Stewart into a Whole Foods and told him to smile through it. Rogan's dig hit deeper than a personal jab. It was a cultural gut check. Real comedy doesn't come with a terms and conditions page. And then there was Tucker Carlson. While Joe hurled kettlebells of mockery, Tucker conducted a slow-burn cinematic takedown. With surgical calm, he exposed not just Kimmel, but the hollowed-out genre he represents. To Tucker, Kimmel wasn't funny. He was a televised death of authenticity, broadcast nightly to a shrinking audience still pretending there's a punchline.
They mean nothing.
I agree. Wait until you hear about this guy named Tucker Carlson. You are going to hate him.
The undeniably big topics, the ones that will define our future, get virtually no discussion at all. War, civil liberties, emerging science, demographic change, corporate power, natural resources.
Right. The big topics, the important subjects like these.
Well, it turns out leprechauns exist not just on cereal boxes. There are a lot of people who believe they have seen a leprechaun. Now it faces an even more profound threat. Zombie raccoons. Honestly, how much emotional support does a snake provide?
Tucker Carlson didn't need to scream or even really try. He simply pointed out the absurdity of a man who once mocked Hollywood elites now functioning as their emotional support animal. And somehow, despite occupying opposite ends of the ideological solar system, Carlson and Joe Rogan arrive at the same conclusion. Jimmy Kimmel isn't funny, edgy, or relevant anymore. He's a TED talk in clown shoes. It's almost impressive, becoming the shared target of two men who agree on virtually nothing except, perhaps, that cardio is a scam. Rogan speaks to Jim Bros and open-minded skeptics. Carlson to fact hoarders and suburban iconoclasts. But both looked at Kimmel's virtue-soaked monologues and said, This is satire. Maybe that's the darkest irony. Kimmel, once the king of irony, now can't even spot his own. The man who built a career laughing at power now bows to it, arms open, tears loaded, approval prepackaged. The jester has become the preacher. The roaster has become the roast. And yet, no one had to yell in his face. Rogan laughed it off. Tucker stared it down. The result was the same. Kimmel was dismantled, not in a fiery viral clash, not in a meltdown, but in the slow, clinical unraveling of everything he once stood for. And the saddest part? He didn't even notice.